Good morning and welcome to this new webinar from ERA, the European Union Agency for Railways. I'm Cyril Martin, Communication Officer, and I will be your moderator today. As you probably know, ERA is fostering international cooperation with different world regions and international organizations to promote railways and exchange knowledge on regulations and best practices. Today's webinar will provide success stories and concrete initiatives of international cooperation towards safer and interoperable railways. On this occasion, we will speak about achievements in two projects with the special dedicated funding by the European Union, IPA, Instrument for Pre-Accession Assistance, and EUMedRail, EuroMed Rail Safety and Interoperability project. In the current circumstances, it is of course also crucial to highlight the importance of the rail sector and international cooperation to maintain and develop transport links with Ukraine. Without further ado, I will now introduce our speakers. After an introduction by Joseph Doppelbauer, the Executive Director of the agency, we will have the pleasure to listen to Mr. Laurent Prat, who works as Legal and Policy Officer in the European Commission's Directorate General for Mobility and Transport, DG Move, in the unit responsible for the Single European Rail Area. Mr. Christoph Kaupat, Project Officer in the agency, the Project Manager for the IPA project, also in charge of our cooperation with OTIF and Transport Community Permanent Secretariat. Mrs. Rosa Exposito, also Project Officer at ERA, Project Manager for the EUMedRail project. Mrs. Natalia Skachenko, Project Officer at ERA, the Service Manager for International Relations and the Central Agency's contact for any Ukraine-related questions. We will then have the honor to listen to Ms. Irina Kucheruk, the Director of the Department for International Cooperation of the Ukrainian Ministry of Infrastructure. And last but not least, we will have with us Mr. Volodymyr Shemayev, Director of Office for International Projects, GSC, in the Ukrainian Railways. Thanks to all of you for being here today with us. Before I give the floor to Joseph Doppelbauer, I'd like to remind you that, as usual, you are most welcome to ask questions to our speakers using the chat function, which you will find at the top right-hand corner of your screen. You can also tag questions from other attendees which you judge valuable by clicking the third icon. We will do our best to reply to the greatest number of questions at the end of this webinar. A last word to say that this event is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel and our website in the coming days. Without further ado, I will now give the floor to the Executive Director of ERA, Joseph Doppelbauer. Please, Joseph, the floor is yours.
Many thanks, Cyril, and also from my side, welcome to this webinar on international cooperation. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The international dimension is an important part of the mission, vision and portfolio of the European Union Agency for Railways. We are continuing at the technical level to the implementation of the political guidelines of the European Commission. And we know that railways as a transport mode has global importance. In line with our mission ERA contributes to the further development and the effective functioning of a single European railway area without frontiers. In our current multi-annual working program, we have the ambition and a related strategic statement to seek that the European Union will become the global reference for rail, and eventually that authorizations issued by ERA will be recognized globally. To this end, the agency continues strengthening international cooperation in rail by following the EC International Relations agenda, where we find the priorities in terms of technical and geographical areas. While supporting the European Commission, we are also glad to maintain and to develop contacts with our peer organizations in the European neighborhood and across the globe. The EUMedRail and IPA projects, as mentioned by Cyrielle, represent two successful examples of a structured cooperation to promote railway regulation beyond the European Union borders, and these projects highlight the benefits of a lasting engagement. The first webinar organized by ERA on the subject of international cooperation took place 1.5 years ago, on the 15th of April 2021. Meanwhile, the importance of railways and supporting international cooperation has continued to grow. This webinar aims to remind and to update our stakeholders and partners on the key projects and, of course, on the news in this domain. We are pleased that Laurent from DG Move will join us today, and he will provide an overview of the EU external rail transport policy activities. With the unjustified war brought by Russia to Ukraine, on the European continent, we are more and more discovering the wider role and challenges for rail transport. The importance of the connectivity with Ukraine goes beyond Europe. ERA firmly stands with the Ukraine and supports the actions of the European Commission and joint efforts such as solidarity lanes. Nowadays, the support to Ukraine on technical and interoperability issues is one of the key pillars of the agency's tasks. We are particularly thankful to the Ukrainian colleagues for the possibility today to join the webinar and to provide some first-hand updates to the European and international community directly from the railway specialists. Thank you for being with us today despite difficulties of the daily logistics now in the Ukraine. Dear audience, dear speakers, I would like to wish you a very interesting and useful webinar, and I now give the floor to Laurent Pratt from DG Move. Laurent, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Doppelbauer, and welcome everybody. Good morning. It's a pleasure for me to intervene in this seminar today, my presentation will give you a very broad panorama of what we are doing at the Commission at the EU level as regards the external dimension of rail transport policy. I should say immediately that I will not cover the activities of ERA, as a matter of fact, because we have enough participants, and I will not also cover the part concerning the infrastructure and the TNT network. This would be too long and too broad for today's objectives. So, in a nutshell, the starting point of our activity is, of course, the internal policy, the transport policy, which is geared toward the objective to create a single European rail area, as mentioned by Mr. Doppelbauer, fully integrated and fully interoperable, both in terms of markets and networks and operations. There's been a long history of legislative developments, but to note the main ones since 2001, there were 3 legislative packages. The 4th one was adopted in 2016, and we call them the technical pillar and the market pillar, because they address effectively the economic regulation, the functioning of the markets, the supervision of the markets, but also obviously the harmonization of technical safety and interoperability standards. So we have a complete legislative framework as regards the internal market, and from this basis, our activity outside the EU is articulated with other policies of the European Union. So typically, the enlargement and neighborhood policy, which this is one axis. Another axis is our participation with the member states in international transport organizations. And there are also, I would say, more ad hoc or broader policy frameworks where we are also contributing specifically on railway transport policy. So as regards the first axis, I divided this in two groups. The first one is where there are legal obligations for the neighboring countries concerned to incorporate the acquis of the European Union. They have to align the national legal framework. So this is for the EEA, the EFTA countries, which are not formally part of the EU, but adopt, let's say, parallel rules in selected policy areas, including transport. This is the case for candidate countries for EU memberships. And there I added Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine because they, as you may know or not, they recently received the status of candidate countries. So this extends also the geographical area where we are working to support the implementation of the EU acquis. And the objective is also to prepare these countries which have the objective to become full members to the practices of our regulatory framework, whether it is for participation with ERA activities or different committees. And we have also specific instruments on transport cooperation. One is the Transport Community Treaty between the EU and the 6 Western Balkan countries, which is, let's say, a multi-sectorial treaty aimed at boosting the integration of these countries on the particular transport sector. Or we have also the land transport agreement with Switzerland, which is also aimed at deepening the harmonization and economic integration, specifically on land transport. Then we have a second group where we have partnerships of different kinds, different level of formalization, and there let's say the cooperation is made essentially on the voluntary basis, but with the same objective to align and to share best practices to facilitate the extension of European standards and therefore the development of rail transport services. Further than that, we have also, I would say, more ad hoc exchanges with a number of agencies and regulators around the world on specific topics, and we also contribute to high-level policy dialogues let's say, with other regional organizations. So that is for, let's say, the first part of our activities on the international rail affairs. Of course, the second one is our contribution to the activities of international rail organizations. The main one for us is OTIF, because the EU is itself a contracting party of the COTIF Convention with 25 EU member states, and this is where we work the most to achieve, let's say, a consistent development of the rules, and with the objective to maintain equivalence between the two regulatory framework. We are also active in the cooperation in the OSGD organization. This is basically the sister organization of OTIF that's centered on the ex-Soviet Union area. So basically Russia, China, and Central Asia, but also Eastern Europe. So we have 9 EU member states which are also members of the OSGD. And this is one of our challenge. Excuse me. This is one of our challenge to work with both organizations to achieve this consistent and coherent regulatory development. And on top of that, we are also working and contributing to the activities of the UNEC, the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. As you know, this is a UN body which is very active on the standardization of land transport. In rail, we are contributing to the so-called Unified Railway Law Initiative, which is aimed at improving the regulatory environment on the Eurasian continent, and especially for supporting the traffic between Europe and Asia. So very rapidly, this is the map of OTIF member states. There are 51 member states today, plus the European Union. And this is also an illustration of the fragmentation, if you can call it like that, of railway law for international traffic on the Eurasian continent. Now, because I know we have a lot to do today, I will quickly mention some current strategies where the EU is involved with its railway transport policy. The first one is the Connecting Europe and Asia strategy. This is essentially to put in coherence our different contributions in order to boost the establishment and the development of Eurasian corridors. Of course, this is done also in a collaboration with the transport and the Trans-European Transport Network policy, and it's also linked to the development of the Chinese Silk Roads. Another initiative, more recent, is called the Global Gateway. This is a very broad initiative intended to tackle the most pressing global challenges, from fighting climate change to improving health systems and boosting security of global supply chains. It will mobilize up to 300 billion euros of investments until 2027, and it will inter alia promote in the transport sector worldwide infrastructure investments. A more, let's say, operational initiative where we are also very active is the assistance to Ukraine. You have certainly heard about the Solidarity Lane initiative. So this is actually an action plan with different type of initiative, with the main one being to establish new transport routes by land in order to alleviate the blockade of the Black Sea or the restrictions on the trade on the Black Sea. This has been a very important part of our activity in the past few months. This is an illustrative indicative map of the routes that we have been trying to develop with quite some success. Today, one figure to share with you. In October, in the full month of October, Ukraine was able to export almost 7 million tons of agricultural products, and around 40% used the land bridge, and mainly by railways within the EU or to reach the ports on the Baltic or the Adriatic. So that would be all for my presentation today. I know it's very quick, it's a panorama, but I will be able to take your question if you have any now or later. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Laurent. It was indeed very interesting. Thanks a lot. I will now give the floor to my colleague, Christoph Kaupat. So I recall that Christoph is project officer in the agency and is the project manager for the IPA project. So also in charge of our cooperation with OTIF and Transport Community Permanent Secretariat. Unfortunately, Christoph couldn't be with us today, so he recorded a video message for us that we will launch shortly.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, I'm going to say a few words in this webinar about the cooperation of the EU Agency for Railways with the West Balkans and Turkey. Dear colleagues, West Balkans are an area which comprises Albania and former Yugoslavia. So it's a region of 6 countries, and Turkey as another player, and they all are EU candidate or potential EU candidate countries. For this reason, we support them as EU Agency for Railways, and we cooperate with the ministries of transportation, with the national railway safety authorities, with the national railway accident investigation bodies, and we support the railway undertakings and the infrastructure managers of the region. All of these countries have in common that they have acceded to COTIF. COTIF is a very traditional and a very important legal instrument, and it is called the Convention for the International Carriage by Rail. It has a number of appendices, and the technical appendices allow that the trains can cross borders beyond the EU. Why is that? Because the different legal regimes inside the EU and outside the EU are not always the same. COTIF provides as an important base for cooperation. So, to make a practical example for you, if a train wants to go from Istanbul to Scotland or from Belgrade to the north of Norway, there are normally different legal regimes in place, but COTIF provides a harmonized way to exchange vehicles at EU borders and allows to go the trains beyond these borders. In order to strengthen the cooperation between the aforementioned countries and the EU, there is the IPA instrument or the IPA instrument, the instrument for the Pre-Accession Assistance. It's an EU funding mechanism which allows the EU Agency for Railways this year and also 2023 to support the countries in the region, Albania, former Yugoslavian countries, and Turkey. There's also an important player in the region, which is the newly founded Transport Community Permanent Secretariat. It's a body which comprises the 6 West Balkans and all of the EU, and it strengthens the cooperation for transport questions in that region. We closely cooperate with them. We cooperate with the OTIF Secretariat in Bern, and we cooperate with the European Commission, which is providing us the IPA funds also next year, for which ERA is very thankful. To come to the conclusion, the cooperation with West Balkans and Turkey is of utmost importance to Europe and to the EU Agency for Railways. It's been a long-standing activity, and we are looking also forward to cooperate in future to continue in 2023 and beyond. If you have any questions concerning the IPA project or the cooperation with West Balkans and Turkey, please contact us through our website or by email. I'm very happy to answer you any questions in relation to this cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christoph. I will now hand over to another colleague from ERA, Rosa Exposito, working specifically on EUMedRail projects. Please, Rosa, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Cyrielle, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The EU Agency for Railways has provided technical assistance to the Southern Mediterranean countries since 2017 through the grant released by the European Commission in the framework of the European Neighbourhood Policy. The EUMedRail project aims to strengthen railway safety and interoperability, and for this purpose, the project tasks have been organized in different work packages. First of all, the agency supports partner countries to enhance railway safety with a special focus on improving their safety management system. And in particular, this year, the agency has organized a capacity building workshop in the field of risk management and another workshop on human and organizational factors and safety culture. One of the objectives of the project is to assist in the establishment of national safety authorities and national investigation bodies. And to pursue this objective, the agency has organized a workshop on risk-based supervision by national safety authorities and co-organized a training for investigators with the support of the Belgian NAB. Another key priority of the project is to promote international railway standards. And for this reason, we have involved OTIF in many of our activities this year, in particular to discuss the equivalence between the EU safety regulatory framework with international railway law. The EuroMed experts have increased their participation in the agency activities. They were invited to the ERTMS conference that took place in Valenciennes this year, from the 26th to the 28th of April. They also participated in the multimodal conference and are actively following the webinars. And while this is important, the project initiative that brings the most of the benefits is the traineeship program. Currently, the agency is hosting 3 trainees from Morocco and Egypt that work in the field of safety and analysis and monitoring, and that will transfer their knowledge to their home administrations. As part of the bilateral assistance, the EUMedRail project has provided technical support in areas targeted by the countries themselves. On 21st and 22nd of June, the agency, with the strong cooperation of the Italian infrastructure manager, RFI, organized a technical visit addressed to the Israel authorities in the field of safety in railway tunnels in Bologna. With Algeria, Egypt, Tunisia, and Jordan, we organized a training on safety management system in the first quarter of the year. Last but not least, we have disseminated the best practices and the success stories, publishing articles and promoting project activities on the social media. As part of this work package, we will also organize the final conference. I thank you very much for your attention, and I will be pleased to reply to your questions if you have any. And I now give back the floor to my colleague, Cyrielle.
Thank you very much, Rosa. Thank you very much. I will now give the floor to my colleague Natalia, in charge of other work streams of the agency's international relations. She's also our central contact for Ukraine. Please, Natalia, the floor is yours.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor to speak at the webinar and present you some other work streams of the agency in relation to international cooperation. Our executive director mentioned our vision and mission and a number of strategic objectives. And I would like to start from some other framing documents and principles. It's just to mention how our international activities are described in our funding regulation. So in relation to the topic of today's webinar, it is important to mention that the funding agency regulation foresees that in pursuing the objectives of the agency, such as fostering interoperability and safety in the single European rail area, we shall take full account of the process of enlargement of the Union and of the specific constraints relating to rail links with third countries. We also can develop contacts and prepare administrative arrangements with certain peer organizations, and that is with the aim to keep up with scientific and technical developments and to ensure promotion of the Union railway legislation and standards. So we have quite a good framework, very well clearly established in our legislation to accompany these important activities, which is part of our portfolio. Next slide, please. So on this slide, we see that among the administrative arrangements, we have already a number of documents established and being applied since a number of years with some partners. For example, we have administrative arrangements with OTIF Secretariat and DG Move. We also have memorandum with OCGD. Meetings are currently on hold. We will see that a bit later. We have memorandum of understanding with Transport Community Permanent Secretariat, memorandum with Federal Railroad Administration of the United States, with INTT, Land Transport Agency of Brazil, Gulf Cooperation Council. Recently, we also established administrative arrangements with the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport of the Republic of Korea. Also, we have a memorandum with the International Union of Railways, USC. So, of course, the geography of our contacts is not limited to these memorandums. It was mentioned by precedent speakers, and I would particularly make reference to the presentation by Mr. Laurent Prat from DG Move, that the geography of promoting railways as a transport mode, of promoting the benefits of rail and discussing common challenges is quite larger, and when it is required, we are there to support the European Commission and also to exchange views and experiences with our partners. Next slide, please. So in the previous webinar, about 1.5 years ago, I presented quite a big scope of cooperation with Organization for Cooperation between Railways, with which we had a fruitful demanded cooperation since 2007 in order to foster interoperability, to discuss relevant topics of interoperability and safety in relation to various gauges, the standard European gauge, 1435 mm, and the broad gauge, in order to promote exchange of experience and interoperability at the border between European Union and other countries. We had also dialogue in other fields like coding and telematics, and this memorandum is still in our portfolio. Unfortunately, this year, in the course of the aggression by the Russian Federation in Ukraine, we had to take decision to put on hold the involvement in the meetings until further communication. So we will coordinate with DG Move when there are better conditions to restart the meetings with this organization. So the OCGD was mentioned as one of the important organizations, along with OTIF and UNICE, and we thought it is important to update you where we are today. Next slide, please. what is good indeed is that during the long years where we had meetings at the platform of ERA and OSGD, we established many contacts, and among those contacts are the contacts with the colleagues from some countries of the Eastern Partnership, Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. And of course, the information which has been collected in the past has been useful and has provided a basis for further exchanges. We had the opportunity to present in detail packages of major new pieces of European legislation, major new approaches introduced, such, for example, the agency authority functions, the changes to the safety management system, the development of the safety culture, and many other topics. Also maintenance of vehicles. So, but now, if we come back to the topic of support to Ukraine, of course, the cooperation needs to be further developed. We contribute to cooperation at EU level, cooperation by the European institutions and the European rail sector with Ukraine to help the resilience and development of rail links. We support Ukraine and the people around the world by finding additional ways to transport Ukrainian food products by rail. So in practical terms, we have, of course, working contacts. We help with information, we help with our expertise. We contributed to some extent to the refugee task force of the ESC. We developed pragmatic approach on some aspects of the freight transport between Ukraine and the European Union. We are further contributing with some analysis to the solidarity lanes. And of course, we will be adapting our support to the evolving context and the requests from the European Commission and Ukraine. That probably or likely will be also covering in future the topics of integration and questions of interoperability, especially with the European standard gauge in extending and developing TEN-T networks in the Eastern Partnership countries, particularly Moldova and Ukraine. We had recently possibility to meet colleagues at InnoTrans in person, and we will continue our contacts and support in feasible ways. Next slide, please. Maybe before I present this topic, I also should mention that we cooperate with several stakeholders worldwide, and we have exchanges between peer organizations to explore possibilities and benefits of further cooperation, exploring common approaches on common shared questions. So we do cooperate with large geography of countries. Now let me present in a bit more detail the relatively new topic, perhaps to some of you, which is the unique rail vehicle identification system, Orvis. Next slide, please. So first of all, the description of that system. Orvis is a number to permanently identify rolling stock and securities related to the assets. It is the first global and permanent identification system for rolling stock. It is voluntary and it runs alongside the local registration number. For example, the event number on the territory of the European Union. And also it complements manufacturer's serial number. So today, for example, unlike with road vehicle chassis, there is no permanent number affixed to rolling stock. It can change when, for example, there is a sale or leasing or some other transactions, let's say, with the railway vehicles, and therefore it increases the cost and makes some investment cases more difficult, more expensive. So the legal basis for Orvis to address this issue is resulting from an international treaty, Luxembourg Protocol of 2007, which implements the Cape Town Convention on International Interests in Mobile Equipment. Currently, only EU, Sweden, and Luxembourg have ratified the protocol to our knowledge, while few other member states have signed and should ratify soon. Orvis is an initiative of EUMedRail, OTIF, and contracting states. Orvis numbers will be permanently affixed on rolling stock and will be assigned by a digital international public registry containing basic information on the asset and related international interests. Next slide, please. The Luxembourg Protocol creates a global security interest and it facilitates global leasing, financing, and trade of new and second-hand rolling stock by establishing a new legal framework securing creditors, resolving complex documentation and structuring of cross-border bank financing, leasing on cheaper and safer terms, transparency of securities related to each asset globally, easier repossession of assets in case of debtor default, easier access to international private sector finance without state guarantees. The Cape Town Convention's protocol on aircraft is enforced and adopted by more than 70 states with thousands of registrations of assets to date. Next slide, please. And that will be the last one, I think. In my presentation, so the reason to present you the subject today is that in 2020, the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe set up a group of experts to work on the permanent identification of railway rolling stock in order to adopt technical guidelines and model rules for issuing and managing Orvis. Experts from ERA, from Analysis and Monitoring Unit, have contributed to this work as members of this group, alongside with some other industry associations, CR, USC, and some national safety authorities of EU member states. This work was finalized in September 2022 to set how and where the Orvis identifier should be affixed on rolling stock, select type, material, and relevant technologies, draft model rules and definitions of rolling stock in scope of Orvis. The group of experts will report next week, actually, to the Working Party on Rail Transport of UNEC. So if you're interested in that topic, you could follow the news from UNEC, what's going to happen next with this initiative.
Thank you very much. We have unfortunately Mrs. Irina Kusheruk for the timing is unable to join us. So what I suggest is that we will directly waiting and hoping that she will manage to join us in the meantime. I will now directly give the floor to another speaker from Ukraine, Mr. Volodymyr Shemayev, the Director of Office for International Projects in the Ukrainian Railways.
I'm very glad to be a participant of such a webinar. As Cyril mentioned, we are currently in a great turmoil here, but Ukrainian railways stay strong, and with the immense support from our European partners, namely the European Commission, DG Move, ERA, and other institutions of the European Union, greatly support us on all possible matters, with the technical assistance, with the financial support, and with even like moral support, because we know that we are partners, we have friends in Europe, and that's why we will together prevail. So I will have a short presentation for our participants. Can you please share it? So prior to the start of war on February 24th, Ukrainian railways demonstrated sudden improvements in the volume of cargo transportation, picked up the volumes, namely for grains and for some other materials. And in 2021, we actually started a program for the fleet renovation. There was the first ever budgetary support to replace 100 rail cars for passenger transportation. We built a certain amount of new rail cars for freight. And the project for the S-Bahn type of project near Kyiv was kind of started to be executed. Next. However, the February 24th disrupted all our plans, unfortunately, and we had to transform all our activities to become so-called by media to become a second army of Ukraine to protect the country, to relieve suffering of our people, evacuees, and become a partner for businesses in the relocation of the transport routes from the blocked ports on the Black and Azov Sea towards the western border. As I mentioned, since February 24th, more than 4 million people got evacuated by rail. And the picture you see is not from the 20th century. It was beginning of March 2022. It depicts the station, the main station in the Kyiv railway downtown, where you see how people thought that would be the last possible train, but our heroic stewards and loco drivers and workers of the passenger company and the station company did all they could, working for 50 hours without rest to evacuate as much people as possible. Unfortunately, we also saw very nasty moments when the railway infrastructure was shelled, was destroyed by the enemy with the strikes on stations, on the rail tracks, on the locomotive depots, and as of today, I'm very pity to say that, but more than 250 rail workers died because of the war. However, we stay strong, and we have no other choice but to fulfill the obligations and the missions of the railways, and we believe that any railway in Europe and overseas will do the same. We started to redesign the processes, the routes, and since March and April, the volumes of cargo towards the west and in general started to pick up after the huge drop in February. And by participating in the initiatives of the European Commission, like the Solidarity Lanes, we can now already say that the volume of cargo transported through the western border grow from 2 to 3 times. And the number of bogie changing stations, number of border crossing points also increased, even during this Russian aggression. So as you can see here, not only grain but other cargos picked up, especially during the summer season when the yield was collected by Ukrainian farmers. As for the passenger, of course, we also observed the drop in the passenger transportation, but there was a decision made by Ukrainian railways to provide evacuation trains from the hotspots in the east of Ukraine and from the Kyiv city region for free, to let people actually go and keep the shelter in a safer place. Jointly with the Doctors Without Borders International Organization, we also launched the so-called medicalized train with the 8 cars, independent diesel generator and the oxygen concentrators, to get the chance for evacuation for the patients, because the people with reduced mobility, even for those who cannot walk. And starting mid of April, already more than 200 such patients got to the safer places in Lviv, to Poland, and some other destinations. As you can see from on this picture, our management board actually converted into the squad that travels constantly to chase for the shells and destroyed infrastructure, to make decisions immediately right at the place. And one of the examples of such an action was that recently you might have known that the great part of the Kharkiv region was liberated, and our team was instructed by the Ministry of Infrastructure to go there to check out the tracks, the catenary, stations, and to resume passenger services as soon as possible, so that our people, Ukrainians, would see that Ukraine is there, and the government takes care of them, so that they can live in safe conditions with the mobility available. Apart from the sort of immediate reactions to the aggressions, we also understood that without railways, economy would not survive. And one program that we initiated is actually relaunching and rehabilitation of the border crossing points and the lines leading to border crossing points. So besides the border crossing points that are part of the core, either core or comprehensive TEN-T network, there is a number of so-called not previously that important BCPs, and the track to them sometimes have been abandoned for decades. So just recently we restarted the connection between Ukraine and Moldova, namely Berezno-Bessarabyaska. Currently, we're working on rehabilitating the standard gauge tracks on the section Kovel-Yagodin, Kovel-Yagodin, Vadul-Seret, Vikshane with Romania, and Mostyska to Medica in Poland, so that European carriers are now able to send their locomotives or the wagons or rolling stock to pick up the cargo, and vice versa, like our partners, especially on the LHS in Poland, provide their infrastructure and to provide all this interoperability to make sure that the cargo and grain in particular from Ukraine has technical capacity to be transported in the volumes that of course cannot replace the seaports because of the size, but still it is much more efficient than send the cargo by truck, and the statistics show that we started with 300 tons per month in March, and now we transport almost by western border almost 1 million, and with the grain initiative brokered by the United Nations, the volume of grain exceeded 3 million tons per month. As international media and our president recently said, Ukrainian railways and the railway transportation in general plays a crucial role for country's resilience, and we are happy to do so. We will be continuing just serving our people, our country, And as we sometimes say to our good friends and ERA and the European Commission as well, are our friends and partners. And we don't care who are our enemy, but we do care and we value who our partners are. In conclusion, I would like to say that we believe that in the nearest future, we will be participating in such a webinar, not only showing what is happening right now in Ukraine, how people and the railways workers suffer or demonstrate bravery and heroism, but also discuss more technical point on how to connect our system to the European rail family, how to build more standard gauge in Ukraine, how to increase the capacity of the border crossing points. We're actually doing it so now, but we believe we could benefit from ERA and from European rail family in setting the technical standards for the construction, for the safety issues, and for interoperability for both passenger and freight transport. Thank you very much, and for the last motto, Ukraine and Europe will jointly prevail. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shemaev. It was very, very important, I think, and interesting to listen to you. In the meantime, I'm very happy to announce that Mrs. Irina Kucheruk managed to join us. Before we give her the floor, I would just like to show the very short video we talked about just before. So we launched the video, and then I give you the floor, Mrs. Kucheruk. Thanks a lot. I'm now extremely happy and honored to give the floor to Mrs. Irina Kucheruk, the Director of the Department for International Cooperation of the Ukrainian Ministry of Infrastructure. Please, Mrs. Kucheruk, the floor is yours.
So good day. I hope the connection is okay right now. I definitely managed to join this conversation. Previously, we had some technical issues. I hope you hear me and see me very well. So I will not take a lot of time. Just will provide some brief information as a position of the ministry here in this conference. Will be very short, but hope really very useful. So just the ministry, within the framework of the implementation of the association agreement between Ukraine and EU, ensures from our side the adaptation of the legislation of Ukraine to the legislation of the European Union. And you know, just since from June this year, we have a very hard work, and we try to do our best in all possible ways to manage and to cope with the challenges that we are facing right now. And the introduction of the European model, especially of the rail transportation market in Ukraine, implies a significant change in the management principles of the industry. And together with the opportunity and with the support of the People's Deputies of Ukraine, the draft law on railway transport of Ukraine was developed and registered in Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, which takes into account the norms of 6 directives and 2 European Union regulations provided for by the association agreement. And our ambitious goals, of course, they are very wide, but connecting to the railway issues is competitive and efficient rail transport market. The integration of rail transport of Ukraine into the European transport network, the so-called visa-free for freight. A significant role in this process is played by the issues of transportation, safety, and interoperability of the railway system of Ukraine and the EU, working under the same laws and regulations that are compatible with each other. We may have different gauges, but the principles, approaches, and procedures of the technical policy in the railway industry must strive for unity and to unite these 2 sides, if I may name it like this, I mean Ukraine and the European Union, with one railway connection. Good and really excellent railway connection. Despite the difficult times and the full aggression against Ukraine of the Russian Federation, the ministry is actively engaged in the development of new rules and procedures similar to the European one. And in particular, the order of the Ministry of Infrastructure dated 2020, I will name only the year, approved the new regulations on the traffic safety management system and railway support, and brought to the requirements of the directives 2004/49/EU on safety on the community's railways. The Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine resolution just since 2018 approved conformity assessments modules in the field of railway transport and comply with Directive 2009 and Commission decisions 2010 of November 2010 on modules for the procedures for the assessment of conformity, sustainability and suitability for the use, and the EC verification to be used in the technical specifications for interoperability adopted by the directives. At the same time, the implementation of all procedures and rules aimed at operation issues of the railway subsystem requires active work in close cooperation with the European Railway Agency. In particular, this concerns the implementation of the technical specifications for the interoperability, the organizations of the authorization system of railway transport subsystem, keeping registers of railway transport subsystems, and of course, manufacture of rolling stocks and maintenance enterprises. We can make this list as wide and as full as possible, but these main ideas shall keep their approach of Ukraine to be in one line with the European connection. Today's reality is also create new risks for us and challenges, in particular those related to Ukraine's withdrawal from organizations recognized and driven by the aggressor state. It's logical to gradually introduce new rules compatible with European ones when leaving these organizations. We will also be grateful for the assistance of European specialists in the issues of introducing a system of reporting on railway safety issues, organizing the creation of a system of training and examination institutions for train drivers and their authorizations. And just like to make a final final part. Here we hope that this event, I mean today's event, will be the first in the active and fruitful cooperation of the railway specialists from the European Railway Agency, DGMU, Ministry of Infrastructure of Ukraine, and JSC Ukrzaliznytsia. Cooperation aimed at bringing our legislation closer to European one. So previously my colleague Volodymyr Shimaev made a very great presentation and provided all the necessary details on the approaches made. And from our side, we can confirm that since from June, we made a lot of repairs. We've managed to cooperate with all our infrastructure issues related to this unprecedented times in our country. But with your assistance and with your help, we do hope that in the future this pool, I can name it like this pool of opportunities will be wider, we will be more fruitful, and will be more productive for both sides. To understand how we can move forward, what will be the results, what should be the database, and what to do in future, I mean jointly to do. So thank you for this opportunity to have a speech today and to participate in such a good conference.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Kucheruk. Thank you very much for being with us today, and we're very happy you finally be able to join us.
It was not easy to join you.
Yep, we did it. That's what matters. I will now hand over to Josef Topolbauer, the Executive Director of the agency, for a short conclusions before we close this webinar. Please, Josef, the floor is yours.
Many thanks, Cyriel, and my warm thanks to all speakers who have contributed to the webinar today, and of course, in particular, to our speakers from the Ukraine, Mr. Volodymyr Semyaev and Mrs. Irina Kucheruk. It is always heartwarming to hear the reports directly from the people who have suffered a lot of difficult conditions. And of course, our support continues in order to make sure that we can keep the connections open, and also to prepare for the perspectives of cooperation and integration of Ukraine in the European Union. I just would like to highlight once more that we will continue to provide our maximum support. Natalia is here as our contact person, and I remember very well our personal meetings at Innotrans, where we have been able to really establish contacts also at the personal level, also with Mr. Alexander Kamishin, the chairman of Ukrainian Railways, and his team. So thank you very much for being with us today. Thanks again to the speakers, and well, I hand back to Cyriel for the final words on this webinar.
Thank you very much, Joseph. We are indeed now reaching the end of this webinar, so let me thank warmly all of our speakers and the colleagues involved in the preparation of this event. I would like to thank specifically Natalia Skachenko for all her efforts and time dedicated to this event. Dear attendees, thank you for your attendance and participation. We hope you liked this webinar. Before you go, we would be very happy to receive your feedback on this webinar via the QR code you're seeing right now on the screen, and that you can flash with your smartphone. We look forward to meeting you again at one of our upcoming events. On the 1st of December, we will have the pleasure to organize the second ERA ENISA conference on cybersecurity in railways in Lille. On the 6th and 7th of December, we will host in Valenciennes a very great conference on integration of human and organizational factors, managing workload and fatigue. And on the 8th of December, we will have the last webinar of the year about railway maintenance. In the meantime, and in any case, if you would like to stay updated on our activities, you can always sign in to our database by selecting the button Login on our website page. Website that, by the way, is going to be completely revamped very soon. Stay tuned. Last but not least, you can also follow us at any moment on our very active social media accounts, Twitter and LinkedIn. Thank you very much for participating. We wish you a very pleasant lunch and afternoon. Take care.